Hey everybody, welcome back to Guidance Gossip, where Maria and I just talk about our life experience, our healing journey, and how the two of us just leaned on each other throughout single parenting, divorce, and all that fun stuff. So welcome back.
Hi everyone.
So today we're
Sometimes
going
it's
to
just
talk
harder than
about
what you think.
a little more in depth on dating. So it's super funny. Maria, actually, we're going to put her on blast. She got a message this morning, and I will let her tell you a little bit about the message and how these people that you date just don't know, they don't get the point, right? They don't get what you're trying to lay down. And so we'll let Maria talk about that.
So before I got married and got my life together, I was dating this guy and he, he was potential. And that's what we were talking about last week is not dating potential. Because potential, if they're not living up to it and right now, they're never going to change. They're never going to get their life together, even if the potential of them being that is where you see it's never going to happen. And I had been married for 18 years. I was out of the dating scene, so I didn't really understand what all of that looked like. And so when you are in a marriage that is not feeding you emotionally or mentally or even physically, you start to have these negative feelings about yourself. And so then when a person comes in after you're divorced and you're lonely, and they may not be exactly who your ex is, and there's things about them that are completely different. They pay attention to you, they want to see you, they bring you flowers and small gifts, and you're not used to that. So you feed into it and you're like, man, this is great. It's nothing like the relationship I was in before. And so you base it on what you know. And what I knew was not very good. And so this person come into my life and he was good at some things. And I said it many times, he has a potential of being somebody great. But he never ever lived up to his potential. And so when I finally broke it off with him, a few months later, he tried to message me and I shut it down quick because I'm just not interested. Like I'd moved on, I grew past all of this, I'd realized who I was. And then about a year ago, he tried messaging me again. And I'd blocked him on certain things, but somehow he got unblocked or I had to create a new account on my Instagram or something. And you just don't realize who you've blocked and who you haven't because you're not thinking about that. So I end up getting this message from him again. And I'm like, this guy, like I'm engaged to be married. Like, I don't know why you want to talk to me. And so I just said not interested and blocked him again. And then this morning I get another message that is wanting to be like my friend. And I'm like, I do not want to be friends with this person. Like, I don't want anything to do with you. I don't know how else to tell you. And so I met private messaged him back and I said, look, like I am married. I do not want to be your friend. There's no need to even contact me anymore. Like, I don't know how else to tell you that I'm not interested. So I think it's just like, I guess I don't understand it, but how many times can you tell someone, like, get lost?
And so we just thought that that was super funny because this guy was so obsessive over her while they're dating. And I wasn't a fan, right? I wasn't sold on him. I wasn't a
She
fan.
made him cry. She
I
made
did
him
make him
cry.
cry. Yeah. You know, I had this friend that was putting so much work into herself, and I seen what her life was before. And she was a single mom, and she had 4 children at home, but she has 5 children. And I was like, he can't take care of himself, let alone my friend and all of her kids, right? Like, what does he really have to offer? And then he would always steal my snacks, and I hated that because we had like this duplex. And so he would send the kids up to like steal my chips. And I was like, yeah, I'm not supporting this boyfriend of yours. So anyhow, I had a problem
You
with
had to
him.
go. You
So
had to
I did
go.
that
It was
too. When I got out of my first relationship, my first marriage, I remember seeing my daughter's dad. I had never dated before, just like Maria. I had never been single. I didn't know what the dating life was like. And my son's dad and I, we loved each other, but our relationship was extremely toxic. It was very one-sided. I was the person that provided financially. I was the person that did all the work around the house. I cooked, I cleaned, I mowed the lawn, I took care of our son, and nothing was ever good enough. It was always a complaint. And when we would fight and stuff, it was extremely hurtful. He was one of those people that would just cut you to the core and just really like hurt your heart, like a heart wound. So I got out of that relationship, and my daughter's dad kept pursuing me. I worked with him, and I didn't know a whole lot about him, and some of the friends that I had at the time were like, you know what, just go have fun, like let him treat you, blah, 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 blah. And I fell right into it. And he, and when I first seen him, when I first went to his house, I was like, okay, like he provides for himself. He's supposed to be a single dad. He cooks, he cleans. His house was like extremely clean, which I would warn a lot of women of that, because he was extremely OCD. After we had been together for a while, he would do like the white glove test to see if there was any dust anywhere. I mean, even Maria can attest to this. He was extremely OCD.
I wanted to punch him in the face multiple times. We do not like each other and haven't for a long time. And there was a few times that I was really close to it and had all rights to defend myself, and Heather stepped in. But there was a few times I've called him a puke before, and I've kicked him out of our house multiple times. And I can't say it didn't feel good, because we just do not like each other.
Letter, because now I want to punch him in the face. At the time, I was like, I don't want my child to see them like fist fighting in the front yard,
I'd
but
have taken him out. I'd have taken him out.
thinking back, like even after I split up with him, it was insane how much he still manipulated and controlled my life, even though we weren't together. So rewind just a little bit, when he and I were together, Maria had an idea like how toxic our relationship was, but she didn't know the extent of it. And she actually showed up at my house one time because she was going to leave her ex. And so she shows up at my house and she's like, I'm leaving him, I'm getting a divorce. And I think you were wanting to stay there or something. And
I
I
think
was
just
like,
for the night or something.
yeah, just to get away. And I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. Well, he shows up, like, was he I think he was
I
intoxicated.
think he was intoxicated. Yeah.
Yeah. And he starts throwing my stuff out of the house and like calling me all these names, and like threatening to beat me up and all this crap. And so Maria steps in, and she used to always carry a gun on her. And I don't know, what did he do? He started like calling you
He
names.
was coming at me. He was calling you names, and I was yelling at him because he's a douchebag. Oh, I don't know if I can say that, but he was.
You
And so
can.
he started walking at me like he was going to intimidate me. And if anybody knows me, that is not something you want to do, because I was ready to throw down. And Heather's like, she'll shoot you.
I said, she has a gun, she will shoot you. And so I think
And just so we know, I never pulled it out. I would never do that unless my life was absolutely in danger.
yeah. Which, I mean, he was threatening us and he was coming after us. And me knowing the extent of his anger and rage, like it could have gotten there, right? Very quickly, it turns. And Maria didn't really know the extent of it because I didn't tell anyone, because I was too embarrassed to tell anyone. I didn't want people to, I was just embarrassed, I can't really make up excuses for it. I was just embarrassed of the extent of the abuse. And I didn't even know it was abuse. I thought I provoked the fights. I thought it was my fault. And I thought maybe if I just shut my mouth and stop arguing back, then it wouldn't go this far. And so I think you guys ended up calling the cops or something. We called the cops because he was like throwing everything outside. And the cops show up and kind of
They all
de-escalate.
knew Lewis. They made excuses for him
They
because
did.
it was ridiculous. And then the cop tried to cut at me for, I'm like, I have a concealed weapons permit. I have every right to carry a gun. Well, why did you bring one? Because I can. Like
Mhm.
I carry one everywhere I go. And
I
so I
do
kind of
remember the one though. The one came up to me and was like, "We know him. We know him very well. What are you doing with him?" And I was like, "Well, he won't give me my daughter," because I was always afraid to leave the situation because he would hold my daughter. And I just, in my heart, was so afraid that he would be so crazy to get back at me that he would do something to her. Because anytime I threatened to leave, like that's what it was. Like, I will make you disappear and nobody will ever find you. If you ever, think about taking my daughter, I will kill you. I have people that'll bury you. They'll never be able to find you. And so he was so obsessive over that I thought, if I left and I left my daughter there, then he could potentially harm her or use her to get back at me. And so, I would end up staying. And that's exactly what the cop told me. Was he said, "We can't make him give you your daughter. Like, just like he can't kick you out of the house, we also can't make him give you your daughter." And so I ended up staying there that night. And I think my son and I slept in the bathroom because that's where we would sleep, is locked in the bathroom, because that was the only buffer between him and I.
and I think that that is a good point when you said that you didn't know you were in abuse. And I think that we are so programmed, even in like the movies that we watch, like we watch a 2 hour movie and this guy is beating her up and we see the extreme part of the abuse and it seems like it happens all the time and Hollywood portrays it as this, but in reality what happens is it's a moment that this happens and then the emotional up and down that goes on, like, oh man, this happened and then I'm going to treat her like gold the next day and go up. So it's that
Roller
narcissistic up
coaster.
and down roller coaster. And then pretty soon you're like, well, it's not like that. He doesn't do that to me, or it doesn't happen all the time, or most of the time it's okay. And maybe it's something I did wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have said something. And so we find ourselves making excuses for being in abusive behaviors, even if it's a mental abusive behavior or a physical abusive behavior, it's still abuse. And once we've recognized that this is abuse, then it's time to get out no matter what they're saying. It's time to reach out to have somebody help you get out. Anybody, like just to have somebody help you to remove yourself from that situation. And the moment that you give yourself a break away from the abuse, whether it's mentally or physically, you gain so much insight in your situation. And then the roller coaster happens in your mind, like, how could I put myself in that situation? You see yourself as being strong and independent and all of that stuff. Like, how did I get into that situation? And then you make excuses for your own behavior. But the the getting out of the situation and making sure that you're safe is like your top priority. And once you realize that it is that, that's when it's time to go.
And I, even after I left him, I still did not realize it was abuse. It wasn't until Maria told me a story. She was doing some work at a local domestic violence shelter, and she told me of a story of a lady that came in, and my heart hurt for her. But more importantly, my story resonated. It was like my story. I was hearing somebody else's experience, but it reminded me of my story. And that was the moment that I realized how abusive my situation was. Um, and so why I left, I really, like, mentally, I was not in a place where I even cared about myself, because I kind of slightly wished that he would have killed me during that time, because I didn't want to live, because I thought, like, this is my bed. Because we kind of grew up that way, in some of the churches that we were a part of. Not to talk bad about churches, but some churches have distorted beliefs, I feel. And it was kind of like, you made this choice and so you have to stick it out, and the man is the man. And since Marie and I had never had experiences of, like, we didn't grow up with a healthy dad in the picture, we just kind of adopted this belief system. And so in my mind, I just felt like that was the bed that I chose, and I just had to deal with it. Like, there was no way out of the situation, right? And so when I finally left, I left because I did not want my daughter to grow up thinking that that was how a woman should be treated. And the example, even though he wasn't the dad to my son witnessed a lot of it. And I didn't want my son to think that that is how a man should treat a woman. And so that was really why I left. And then after I was out of the situation and I heard someone else's story was when it resonated that I was in an abusive relationship. And that's when I really had to start working on me.
And I think at that point, once you heard the story of once I was working at the YWCA and helping with the intakes and those things, and I would tell her, you know, like, I am shocked at what people do to other people. And I would kind of go through some of the stories that I've heard, not saying names and who they were, but just kind of where they were at. That's when you started putting restrictions on him, because he used to just show up at our house at 6:30 in the morning and walk through waking everybody up. And I'm like, who are you and why are you in my house? So we used to butt heads quite a bit. And I never had a problem putting boundaries there. But I also had to be careful because Heather was still trying to figure all of this out. She just realized that this person was absolutely abusive to her, physically, mentally, emotionally, and still continued
financially.
to do it. Financially, he would use like the child support and things like that. He used to think it was okay to buy just one thing for her daughter and bring it over with 5 kids in the house. And I'm like, yeah, we're not doing that. That's
Or
not fair.
he would sign her up for programs and say, like, I'm going to pay this because as a single mom, you don't have extra money. And then he would stop paying for the program. And then you can't afford to continue the program and then turn around and tell my daughter that I refused to take her. Or daycare, we were supposed to split daycare costs 50-50, and he would stop paying his portion of daycare costs. And so then I would have like 3 months worth of back daycare that I had to try to come up with because my daycare was refusing to take care of my daughter so I could work and provide for her. Or other times he would just simply take her from daycare and drop her off at my work in the middle of the day. Like he just did whatever. And this is after we were out of our relationship. He just went to extreme measures just to try to completely sabotage me. You know, he would just blast me all over, and he put a restraining order on me to saying that I was an unhealthy mom and all this stuff. And then told me, you know, as long as I did what he wanted me to do, he would allow me to see my daughter, and like just, you know, just extreme things. And I didn't realize I knew that I didn't like it, but I really didn't know how to fight it for the longest time until I had another person, which was Maria, tell me, hey, listen, like this isn't healthy. What he's doing isn't healthy. You're out of that situation. You left it for a reason. And now we have to learn how to establish boundaries and what is healthy. And that took me a really long time to finally establish these boundaries, because he was a professional manipulator, you know, and he'd show up at my house crying, or he had just whatever. And when he got to where he couldn't really manipulate me anymore, then he really started manipulating my daughter. At one time, she was about, what, 5 or 6 years old, and he was out of the picture for about, I don't know, a couple months, 3 months, something like that. And he tells my daughter, like, you know, he starts messaging me saying, I need my daughter, I need to see my baby, blah, 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 blah. And my daughter was really upset because, you know, he was MIA for a while and she didn't get to see him. And he tells her, like, well, I had to have heart surgery because I have a broken heart because I wasn't able to see you. And so then he started like using her emotions against her
And it's
to,
not even that. He would take pictures of himself in front of the hospital and send it to
oh,
her. That
stage
he's
4
getting ready
cancer.
to go in. Yeah. So he was dying of heart failure and dying of cancer. And he would go into these hospitals to try to keep the lie going and take pictures of him standing at this desk and in front of the window. And he'd say he's going in, and he just he would go that far as extreme on keeping this lie going just to gain this attention and control over Heather and her daughter's life. And I was like, no way. So we started doing research. We started calling and be like, is he there? Is he here? Does he have this? And they're like, we don't even know who you're talking about.
Show me the scars, you know, and he wouldn't show the scars. And I think the most frustrating part is you as a parent, like, you know how toxic they are. And our motive wasn't even going here, but I'm just going to bring it up because it's frustration that I've had recently. Um, anyhow, the courts, I would have to take him in and out of court, you know, and it doesn't matter how many people he abuses. It doesn't matter how many people turn him in for abuse. It doesn't matter how many times he steps out of the picture and comes into the picture. He relapses, he starts, you know, drinking and doing destructive things or has criminal charges against him. It doesn't really matter what he does with his life. It's like every time you turn around, the court system is excusing his behavior as well, you know, because this has been a battle since she was what, 2 years old, I think.
A
And I
little,
still
yeah.
go through it. I'm still going through it. And they'll put some regulations on them, like you have to have supervised visitation or go through this step program, and then you can have, you know, full visitation again. But when you are, I guess to wrap this, like to circle it back around, when you are not healthy yourself, you fall into these toxic relationships. And so after him, I started dating other people, and I thought, well, this is just a healthier person, right? And I remember one person in particular that I was really truly trying to date. And that he was, you know, a pretty healthy person compared to what I was used to. And I thought that there was something wrong with me. Like maybe it's just because I'm not used to a healthy person is the reason why I can't allow myself to really fall for him or like him. And this person was madly in love with me, was madly in love with me. And I dated him on and off for a few months, and then we broke up. He moved away, he moved back. I tried dating him again. And I think, what did I date him for about a year?
It was a
I,
minute and then you guys were on and off again.
yeah.
But the last time I think was about a year because yeah. And then
And
we ended up dumping him and my ex on the same night.
yeah. So when we went to New York, we decided, because my daughter's dad was out of the picture, he supposedly moved to Chicago, and her kids' dad was out of the picture. So we're like, you know what? Like, we have no reason to stay here. Let's move. Let's move to the East Coast. And we were seriously like getting rid of
We
all of our
were
stuff.
selling everything. We were selling everything we owned that would we were like, okay, we bought 2 new cars so that we would make it all the way to Vermont. And we were gonna fit everything in one of these little U-Haul trailers, and we were gonna start over. We had it planned and we were leaving. We even have a date set. We were getting all this stuff like gotten rid of and gone through and getting all of it into boxes that we could take. And we were thinking the only thing we need is this, and this, and then we're going.
Yep.
And
So we had this plan that
yeah,
we were moving, and that's what made us realize, like, hey, if we are willing to move clear across the United States and we're dating these guys and we don't really care about leaving them behind, like, what the heck are we doing wasting our time dating them? So we're like, I was like, I'm dumping them. Maria's like, yep, I'm dumping them too. So we both,
so it's super funny because we come back from New York. The day we got back, he called me and was like, hey, I want to come over. And I'm like, no, I haven't seen my kids in 10 days. I'm going to spend it with them. We had this elaborate plan that he's going to barbecue steaks and I was going to go over to his house and have dinner. And we had to go to work that day. So we were at work, and the whole day, I was like, I do not want to go. Like, it was amazing to be in New York. And he would try to call every day when I was over there, and I would not answer the phone. I was like, I don't care. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I don't care what he's doing, and I'm going to have fun. And so that whole day at work, I was telling Heather, like, I just don't want to go. And so we get in the car at the end of the day, and I'm supposed to go and get ready and, go to his house. And we're driving home. And I'm like, let's just drive for a minute because I really don't want to go. So we used to talk a lot in the car, like it was kind of our therapy car, and that's what we used to call it. And so we'd go get a coffee, and I'm pretty sure our coffee stand absolutely hated us, or they loved us, one of the
they
two, because
loved
we would
us.
race there to
They
get
loved us.
coffee. And so we ended up getting coffee. And we're driving around and we're talking about this. We're like, we seriously want to go and move, and we're not even sad that we're going to be leaving these 2 people behind. And I'm like, I just am done. Like, I don't even have a desire to want to go see him. He kind of has gotten to the point where he just irritates me, and I don't want anything to do with him. And so I'm like, I'm just going to tell him I'm not coming. So I called him up, and he was like, oh, are you on your way? And I'm like, yeah, no. He's like, are you serious? And I said, yeah, I don't want to come. And he's like yelling at me because he just did all this. And I get it. It's kind of a bad move, but when you're done, like you're done. And I don't care about his feelings. He used to cry all the time, so I didn't care he was crying now. And so I'm just like, yeah, I'm done. And he's like, what? Like done? Like with our relationship? And I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to do it anymore. And so then he's like all cussing and calling me names. And I'm like, oh, this is coming from the person who 3 minutes ago was just telling me his undying love for me and didn't want me to break up with him. And so then he was like, no, I'm coming to your house. And I'm like, do not come to my house. I don't want you at my house. I don't want anything from you. Like your stuff will be sitting outside. And that was it. And it was the most freeing thing I've ever
Yep.
done. Like I was like, no, this is my life, my choice, and I don't want you in it.
So the guy that I was dating, like I had to force myself to hang out with him. He was a nice guy. And the struggle that I had was that I had to choose myself, right? Because he didn't give me a reason to not date him. And so the other people that I had been dating all gave me a reason. They gave me a way out. It's because, the way they talked to me, the way they treated me, the way, whatever. There was like factors. And this person really didn't have a factor. He didn't have anything wrong with him per se. um
I
I
actually liked him.
yeah,
I thought he was great.
I didn't enjoy him like that. And so anytime he'd want me to hang out, like I literally felt like I had to force myself. And so when I called him that day, I was like, up until that point, I was like, I really shouldn't have to force myself to hang out with someone. And if I'm willing to leave him behind, then what's the point in this? Right? Like I obviously there's something not working. And so I called him and he asked me why. I was like, you know what, like I just this isn't working for me anymore. And I don't remember everything that I said. And he asked me why. And I was like, you're boring. Like that's what came out
He
of my
was boring. He was boring. He had a routine. At 6 o'clock, he would watch a certain show, and at 6:30, he would make dinner. And at 7 a.m., he would go to the store, the same aisles every day, and buy the same thing every day. And at 9 o'clock, he would make himself an English muffin. And he was very structured like that, and nothing outside of the ordinary could happen.
and so I broke up with them and he couldn't get over it.
No, he would call me. I had to go and talk to him because he could not understand why Heather did not love him. And finally, I said, maybe you should go see your own therapist because you
So
need help.
we even went to therapy, right? His dad convinced us that we needed to go to therapy because they kept telling me that it was my problem. The reason why the reason why I'm struggling is because it was my problem. And I believed it, right? Like not only did I believe it within myself, but then I kind of believed it because they were saying that until I hit my breaking point. And so he and I went to therapy one time and I turned and I was like, I will do this because I had done therapy multiple times, but I'm not doing this with you. Right. And so I continued to see this therapist. And I remember when he and I were there, the therapist said, well, I believe this relationship, one person is going to just find themselves and move on with life and have an amazing life. And the other one, I feel like is going to be really heartbroken. And so the therapist saw the writing on the wall. And so, yeah, Maria told him, because he kept asking her, well, is she still seeing Dr. Yunker? Is she still seeing Dr. Yunker? Like the problem was still me, right? Like I still had the problem. I just couldn't like a nice guy. And Maria's like, I think you need to go see Dr. Yunker because you can't get over this and you are obsessive. And he wanted to meet with her on a weekly basis to have coffee to double check on what I was doing with my life.
I only went like twice, and mainly just to see like where he was at in the headspace. And I'm like, there's a problem here. There's a problem. So we've kind of went through some crazy stuff together, friend.
Yeah. So then a little bit of time passes. We're single. We're having so much fun. We're still planning on moving, right? Like we're like, oh, yep, we're moving to the East Coast. And that was kind of like our freeing moment. That's when we really woke up and realized like, this is our
we had
life. We're going to do
we had
what
the
we
best
want.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so much fun because when we first moved in, either she was dating someone or I was dating someone. And this was the first time since we lived together that we were both single, and we had a blast. We did tons of stuff. Like that's when we took our kids ice blocking, and we took them to Leavenworth to go sledding over there.
Wedding.
Like, and then the road was closed. We had to take the long way around. We had no radio, so we'd come up with all these crazy songs. Our kids thought we were insane,
We
and
still
I'm
sing
pretty
the
sure
song.
they still know the song. So it was a great time. And then we were at work one day, and I used to flirt with this guy named David. And I tried to, but he was always like so
No,
focused on work.
she didn't start flirting with him yet. She almost had to have the permission, right? And this was like a little bit of her, like an outsider looking in, a little bit of her like insecurities, which we all have them. But he would like, she helped this customer and he buys her this coffee card for like $20 or something like that.
No, it was like $35.
Or $35, yeah, and tells her thank you. And he kept doing like little gestures like that. And she's like, well, I don't know. He just gave it to me and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, dude, he's hitting on you. And she's like, no, he's not. And I'm like, I do stuff all the time here at work and I don't get any freaking coffee cards. I wish I got a coffee card, but I'm not getting one and nobody else is either. So he's hitting on you. And she's like,
Well,
huh.
I'm like, no, he's not, because I would go over to the service department all the time, and I would flirt with everybody else over there and laugh and joke. And I would like look back to see if he was even noticing. And he was just on his keyboard typing away, not saying anything to me. And I would try, and I would tell her, like, I don't think so. I don't think that he's even interested. And I'm like, at the time, I think I was what, 34 years old, and I
No,
had kids.
36.
34, 30, I think maybe, because yeah, anyhow, I was in my mid 30s and I had my kids and they were still all little. And here's this guy who doesn't have any kids. And I'm like, oh no, like I'm a mom, I have way too much baggage. Like he's not even going to be interested. And so, but I was still flirting. I wanted to see. And I think it was a couple months we were just single having a good time, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And so he brings me, like Heather said, this coffee card because he'd come over. It was kind of late in the evening and I was in the office. And he's like, I really need to get this lady home. She only lives up this road. And I'm like, all right, it can't be too far. No, it was like 45 minutes away from the shop. And I'm like, I'm, and Heather's like waiting for me at work to come back. And I'm like, oh, you owe me big time. And he's like, oh my God. I'm like, it was way out there, like way out there. And so just giving him a bad time. And then the next day, here's this coffee cart. I'm like, I'm thinking it's $5. So when I go to get a coffee, they're like, oh, you have a remaining balance of like $30. I'm like, are you kidding me? So then I go back and I tell Heather, I'm like, there's like $35 on here. Like, nobody does that. And she's like, oh, he likes you. I'm like, no, he doesn't.
He
So
liked
I
her.
think a couple of weeks go by, and all the girls are like, oh, who do you think is hot in the shop? Because we had a group of girls that worked in the office and we kind of had some downtime. I think it was like administration day or something. We were all going out to have dinner, all the girls and stuff. And so we were all kind of sitting around the table and we're like, oh, I like this person or that person. And I'm like, I think Dave's hot. And they're like, what? Really? I'm like, oh yeah, he's hot. And
And mine was Mike, which at the time I worked with my now husband as well, which I had worked with him for a long time. I just always thought he was hot.
yeah. So then me and Heather decide we're gonna go out. It's like a girls' night. We don't have kids because they're at their dad's for the weekend. And so we decide we're gonna go out. And it's cold. So we're sitting in the car and trying to stay warm before we go back into the bar. And yes, we did go have drinks. We're not alcoholics. We're responsible. And all of a
Until
sudden
we
she's
drink too
like,
much.
we did a little bit, a few times, but not often.
No.
So she's over here like texting away. And I'm like, don't talk to him. Like, don't talk to him, because what if he doesn't like me and then I have to go to work the next day and be like embarrassed because he's not interested, and you just put that out there. Like, what if he says no? So she's like, we're all adults, just have fun. We were
Well, and
leaving
we
in a
were
month.
moving. We
In
were
a
moving.
month.
Yeah, in a month.
Yeah.
So I was like, what do you got to lose? Like, you don't have to see him again ever, you know?
And then come to find out that he liked me. And so he was like, I would go on a date with her, but I'm not interested in a one night stand. And I'm like, what? And so I think it was a couple weeks we waited
Mhm.
after that night. And he was like, I would take her out to dinner or something.
You guys started
So
talking that night. Like that was the
yeah, we kind
initiation.
of
Yeah.
talked back and forth on Facebook a little bit, just kind of, flirty little stuff. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to see him at work. And so I what was okay because he was in a different department than we were, so I didn't have to like sit there with him the whole day. And so anyhow, we ended up meeting up and having a couple drinks after work one night. And I'm here to tell you, it was the best time I'd ever had with anybody. We were so like open and honest. We sat down. I was like, I have 5 kids, 4 of them live at home. I'm out of a divorce. I'm not divorced yet. I've been like trying to get one, but divorces take a long time. I kind of have some issues. I'm independent and strong and funny, and that's who I am. Take it or leave it. And he was like, this is me. And it was a couple hours and it seemed like 5 minutes. It was
Mhm.
the best time I'd ever had. And so we leave the bar and he takes me home. He gives me a very respectful goodnight kiss. And that was it. Like he was like, I'm like, you don't want to come in? And he's like, no, like I have more respect for you than that. And so we dated, like went out a few more times and nothing ever happened for months. And he was very respectful like that. So, which if he would have just came in with me that night, and I don't think I would have even be with him today because that's not what I was really looking for. And he had so much respect for me that that's not what he was looking for. And so that like really changed my opinion about like relationships.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we started. And now I'm married to him. So
So they started dating and I was a third wheel. I had been a third wheel for ever. I think at that point I'd been single for like 8 years. I mean, I'd date, but it was nobody solid. Like no one I shared my life with and was super serious about. And so I didn't mind being the third wheel. But then they started like, just like we talked, I think it was last week, it sparked a desire in me. I thought, okay, well, maybe I should get serious about this whole dating thing and actually figure out what I want, because otherwise I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. And, you know, I didn't want to be
we
single.
already had it figured out, me and Dave, because I wanted my friend to date somebody that we all liked and could get along with. And I didn't like her last boyfriend because he was a little weird. I mean, he's nice enough, but he tried to make himself a flower because we got him high one time. And apparently he doesn't do good on it. One of these days I'll have to show you. I can't show you the clip, but it was super funny. And but he wasn't serious. Um and me and Dave wanted her to date his best friend Mike.
Which he was
And I
dating
already
someone
knew.
at the time too. And I was, but then at work, he started like trying to flirt with me. But I, and I can't flirt either. Like
No,
it was
no.
weird.
So he's trying to flirt. This is them flirting. She walks down the hallway and at work. And Mike comes up to her and is like, hey, I have a question for you. And she's like, okay. He goes, do you like pumpkin? She's like, no, I like chocolate. And then she comes into the office and she's like, Mike just asked me a really weird question. And I'm like, well, what did he ask you? And she goes, he asked me if I liked pumpkin. And I said, well, what did you say? She's like, I liked chocolate. And I died. And she's like, why are you laughing? And I said, Heather, you just told a black man that you liked chocolate. And she's like, I didn't think about that. And I'm like, yeah, obviously.
So, and then after that, like he would come up and he would like say a word and then he would just stare at me. And I'm like, where's the rest of the words? Where, words just stopped. So I told Dave, like, your friend's weird. Like, I don't know if he's hitting on me. I don't know if he's like, I don't really know. And so I had hung out with them quite a bit. And I had always liked Mike. I always had a crush on him, but like neither one of us were really single at the same time. And I messaged him one night. I'm like, I'm just going to do it, right? And so I messaged him and I was like, you should come over and have a game night with us. And he's like, well, I can't because I have a girlfriend. And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure you're trying to hit on me and flirt with me at work. So obviously this girlfriend's not keeping your attention, right? Which I mean sounds kind of bad, but at the same time, it was true. It obviously wasn't going anywhere. And it wasn't that he was like openly hitting on me, but you could tell that there was a level of discomfort because there was an attraction there. And he never did come over. And Dave, I didn't even know he was dating someone necessarily because Dave told me, oh, that's even a thing. I didn't even know it was a thing. And they were supposedly living together. Do you remember when Dave said that? And so I was really confused.
Like, no, they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I would ask about this girlfriend and Dave would like deny it, like deny any possibility that they were actually dating, that they were just friends, but they're not really dating. And so when Mike told me that he had a girlfriend, then I thought, well, like obviously you're not that interested. I don't really know. I don't know what to say about this. And so it was super awkward for the longest time until Maria invited us to go camping.
Yeah, because I don't know Dave's friends. I didn't want to go by myself. And she was going to ditch me. She was not going to go. And I was like, oh, no, like you're going because I'm not going up there by myself. What if I don't like any of these people? And then I'm stuck up there all by myself. She's like, well, Mike's going to be there and it's going to be weird. I'm like, it's not going to be weird. We're just friends hanging out. And so she ended up going with me. And they rode up in the same truck together because we had to take two vehicles because of all of our camp and stuff.
And it was
And
the same
we had the
thing.
best weekend.
Yeah, it was the same thing. We hit it off right from the get-go and we got to know each other a little bit personally and we were both kind of like, well, you're not really what I thought you were at all. And he said the same thing to me. You're not really what I thought you were at all. Like we both had these like preconceived like ideas of who each other were, but we really didn't know each other on a personal level. And I think by the end of the first night, I was like, so are you going to kiss me or what? And he kissed me. It was all history, you know, it was downhill from there. And we ended up
A
getting
month
married.
later, I think they moved in.
It
I
was
think it was
about
like
2 months
month.
later.
Yeah, because we went because every weekend after that, we were hanging out. We went to weddings together. We went to the Renaissance Fair and went camping. Like every weekend that entire summer, we were out doing something. We went to the beach. Like we just did something every weekend, whether it was camping or going to the lake or going to the Renaissance Fair. And they, at the end of that summer, we were like, it doesn't make sense for you guys to have a house and us have a house when we're either over there or you're over here. Like, why don't we just move in together? And then they did. It's
Mhm.
because Mike broke his toe. They were going to wait until after like the winter, but Mike tried to do the worm at a wedding and broke his toe, and it was all like crooked, and I had to pop it back in place, and it would have been fine there.
And that
But
was like
then
our second date that he broke his toe.
yeah,
So the first few months of our relationship was him on crutches and then they tried to fix it, but what they did to it messed it up even more. So then he had to have surgery on it and then we ditched him actually the day after his surgery and he's all high on pain pills. We went to a girls weekend and our kids are older. Maria's daughter was, what was she, 18, 19? So, you know,
uh-huh.
and so we left him with our kids. And then my cousin
The
left him.
weekend that they moved in, it was like right after his surgery, and they moved in that weekend while we were gone on our girls trip.
Yeah. And then my cousin needed someone to watch her kids. And so her kids were here too. So we left the two guys. This was our test, right? Like, this is your make it or break it. Is this going to work or not? Because this is what you have to deal with. This is what you're signing up for. And you know what? They rocked it. And they probably had about what, 10, well, you had your 4 kids, my 2 kids, and Stacy's 2
Plus their
kids,
friends.
plus their friends. So
Yeah.
yeah, we probably had 10, 12 kids here, and the 2 guys managed. They survived. The kids
They
survived. Everybody survived.
they were even fed. Like they cooked for them and they were excited that we were leaving.
They
They were
were.
like, go and have a good time. They never once held us back from ever going to the girls' weekends. It was something we did a couple times a year. And it's so much fun. We have rules at the cabin where nobody can, like, no guys are allowed. Nobody's allowed to bring anybody back. Like, and it's just a really good time that we always look forward to doing. And we were determined that we were going, and they were excited for us to go. They're like, oh, we got this, we can go.
And they
And
had
it was
guy
a great time.
weekends, so they completely understood it, and we understood their guy weekends. And so it was just what the difference was Maria and I finally decided to go after what we wanted. She wanted Dave, right? She wanted him. And so we put it out there, like tested the waters, and she went after it. And I wanted Mike, and we put it out there, and it did take each other to try to like get this whole thing like navigated and put together. But we finally went after what we wanted, because for the longest time, I didn't even realize that I had a choice in who I dated. I was so happy that somebody wanted me. And so I was settling for somebody who said I was good enough, and settling for someone that might say they love me. Instead, I had a desire. I was like, I kind of want
You
this.
changed the narrative. You
Yeah.
decided what it is that you wanted and who fit that role, and you went after it.
And Maria
And
did the same thing.
yep. And I did not think, because Dave is younger than me by about 4 years, and I did not know that when I first started. And it was almost a deal breaker for me, because I've never, like, I did not want to have to feel like I was older and needed to raise anybody. I wanted a partner, and he was very good at being that partner. And the age doesn't matter, because he stands up and is very manly in his role, and is very comfortable in that role, in that man role. And it's comfortable to be able to be in the role of just being a wife, and being who I am. And that's what is so great about our relationships, is because we chase what we wanted versus somebody telling us what we needed.
Yeah.
And it was a different mindset that we had got into, that this person is the person that makes me happy, that they have the qualities that I wanted. And instead of sitting back waiting for somebody to want you, we stepped up and said, this is who we want. And we went after that. And we continue to do it. Like, these are the desires that I want. This is the kind of relationship I want. I want communication. I want us to be honest with each other. And you just make sure that you are talking those points, and you say it over and over again. And that's where it comes from. Me and Dave have the most honest relationship with each other that I've ever had. Like, I can't even lie to him, even if it's like a Christmas present. I'm like, just don't ask me, because I can't lie to you. And I have no desire to try to hide the truth from him, even when it's like my emotions, or if we're having financial problems or anything. Like, we are always on board. And a lot of times we're on the same page because we communicate.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with Mike and I. Like, we're both very open with each other as well. Mike is not a real big talker, so I had to learn how to kind of pull it out of him. We had to build trust within each other. So it wasn't that we didn't trust each other, but we didn't know how to trust each other on a healthy level. And so we had to build that trust. We had to make sure that we established that firm foundation, so that way we knew that we had something solid that we were building on. And communicating, and if we did have disagreements, like, we both decided, like, I'm not into yelling, I'm not into calling names, I'm not into being angry anymore. Like, I did that my whole entire life, like from the time that I was a little kid growing up all the way up until I was 30, when I became single. And I'm done with it, and he was like, me too. And every single day, and even now, but every single day we fought to make it work. And the amazing part about it, when Maria and I were single before we got into a relationship with the guys, we both said, like, I want to be with someone just like you, friend, because like our personalities meshed, right? And so we had this picture in our minds that of what we wanted. And we ended up with guys a lot like our friend. So Dave is a
Yeah,
lot like
Dave is
me,
a lot like Heather, and
and Mike
I'm a
is a
lot
lot.
like Mike.
Yes. And that applies to everything in your life, right? Like, you choosing what you want. What is it? What kind of work do you want? Do you want to work that 9 to 5? Do you want to work 7 days a week? Do you want, like, Like, what is it that you want out of your life, and go for it, because we waste so much time on people saying that we're good enough. And I had to change that standard in my mind as well, because I poured everything into my job. My job was like my idol in my life. And I finally got to the point where it was like, I really don't have a desire to work for someone. I'm going to quit my job and work for myself. And that has had its struggles on its own, but it was something that I always wanted to do. And until I finally took the plunge and decided to do it, I never would have gotten there. And so sometimes we have these fears that get in our way. We have this desire, but we have these fears. And we just have to run towards those fears and go for our dreams, go for what it is that we want, the relationship that you want, the lifestyle that you want, the job that you want, the income that you want. Like, create this life, allow yourself to picture this life that you want, and you start putting out like standards, like how can you get to those places that you are wanting? How can you establish the life that you are absolutely wanting? And don't settle for less, because life is way too short. And it's never too late to change your
No,
mind.
and with that, there is going to be some emotional things that are going to go through your mind, because you are changing the narrative in your own mind when you change what you want in life. So when you put it out there that maybe you don't feel like you can have that management role because you've never been a manager, but that's not saying that you can't go after that role. It's just you have to stop thinking the negatives in your own mind and putting in those own barriers that you can't get over. You just have to knock them down and go after it. And then with that, you learn as you go. So, and that's really what this was all about today, is just people make mistakes. You learn from those mistakes, and not that they are mistakes. They're just learning curves. And setting boundaries is super important. Setting boundaries within yourself is more important than trying to set boundaries with someone else. So the moment that you set your own boundaries and your own standards of what you will and will not put up with, that is when other boundaries get set automatically, because now you are no longer going to allow that person to treat you like this, because you've set that standard and that boundary. And
Yep.
those are important steps to take. And sometimes those boundaries are hard, because that person that you're setting that boundary with might feel harsh towards you because you've never set the boundaries before, and you might have to continue to reset those boundaries every single time. But they're important to have. And you will fall a lot of times. You'll move that boundary a few times, but pretty soon you'll get used to the fact that you're no longer going to move this boundary. I had to learn that I have a boundary here, and that person can get to that boundary as long as they don't cross it. Where before I would set a boundary and I would start yelling before they even got close to that boundary.
Yeah.
And so I
And
had to
I
relax
didn't
a little
have
bit.
boundaries. I didn't establish boundaries. I kind of was like, just free range for whatever, and I had this people pleasing mentality because I had to prove my worth. And then I realized, like, that's manipulation, and you're really not being true to you, and it's exhausting. So I'm not perfect, and I shouldn't try to portray to be perfect.
But you're perfect.
I'm perfect for me.
Anyhow, there you go. And with that, we're gonna go for today, and hopefully we'll see you next week, where we just talk about like what we've learned, and hopefully someone out there can hear it and learn something from it. We'd like your feedback. So if you have any suggestions for conversations that you would like, or have any questions for us, feel free to put them in the comment section below. Other than that, we're just going to close with a prayer because we like that, and we'll go from there. So Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for the women that we have talked to and is listening to us. We pray that you touch their hearts, that you give them the strength that they need to set boundaries for themselves, and to recreate in their own mind what it is that they want, that you give them the desire to be the best person that they can be. We ask that you touch their lives, that you bring blessings upon them. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Bye.
Yeah.